Okay. Welcome back to the Bees Like That podcast. I'm your host, Chris. Full disclosure, this is probably the, fourth attempt at this episode. Something that's been happening lately as I've been steadily, progressively feeling better day by day. I will take less and less cold and flu symptom remedies, right? So Dayquil, whatever. Less and less of these things. And over the last 3 days, like I said, I'm feeling progressively better as the days go by. But every day, as I push these medications out, all OTC, but as I push them out, like I was out here trying to film this episode earlier, and I'm sitting here like, man, I just feel like poop. What is going on? And then it dawns on me, oh yeah, dumb, you're still sick, but not like sick, but just that, just general whoosh. Anyway, so. And I guess this is good because I have something on my mind that I want to share. And it's probably something that needed to be talked about or discussed, unpacked sooner. But as I sometimes do, is I just assume that most people have a general understanding of what my intent is or why they will hear the same messages repeatedly, right? So one thing I would say to that is one of the reasons I encounter the stuff that I talk about, I see it on a daily basis. So that's another one of the reasons why I talk about it. I don't just talk about it here, but given the opportunity, and where appropriate, because sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can observe something, but you aren't a part of it, so you can't very well insert yourself in it and then have the message be received, in the spirit in which it's intended. Kind of goes over like a rock. So I still bring that stuff here. I highlight it here. That's part of my job, is to continue to highlight this stuff, continue to talk about it. So I struggled for an example. I will lean away from giving an example just to leave the arena open, right? So this is going to be a concept that's one size fits all. You can kind of tailor it to suit the need for whatever situation or context that you're operating in, right? So for those of us who fancy ourselves in any way, shape, or form an activist, or someone who is an advocate for change, an experience that you will likely have over and over and over and over is you will have the same conversations, no matter the setting, about the same issues over and over and over. And this will sometimes build feelings of, being a bit discouraged. It can also cause us to question ourselves. Because the problem is not that we are the only ones that see things or see these things, right? But being the one to continually highlight them and call them forward does single you out, right? It does cause you to stand out. I have this experience, and I've had this experience. It's just something that I've resigned to accept as just a part of my reality. Because I feel like it's a responsibility that I have as I hold space wherever I do, to not highlight the things that I see, or for you to not highlight the things that you see, is to live in direct opposition or contradictory terms to whatever it is, like the message that you espouse about your position on whatever the issues. Doesn't matter, right? And if you're not the voice for change every time, and I'm talking about like you, it has to be every single time. Every time you got to point it out. Every single time. I see it every day. These ideas about different things are just so ingrained and so enmeshed and just interwoven with the cultural psyche and fabric of today that it's dude, it's like herding cats, but it's part of the job. I do have an example that I want to use, but I'm really reluctant to because let me see if I can come up with. And we'll move on, and I'll see if I can come up with a different example. So, with any sensitive topic, there's going to be a bit of maneuvering that you have to do, right? Like this is another thing that I'm learning that I have to accept and get better at. That there is a degree of maneuvering, right? But I'm only willing to abide by small amounts of that, and that is just simply to gain access so that I'm at the table, I'm in the rooms, I'm a part of the conversation. That way I can be actively resisting these things, resisting these systems, these ways of thought, these behaviors, whatever the case might be. Because if I'm not there, and you can supplement me with you, if you're not there, if people like you and I are not at the table, and we're not at the part of these conversations, I mean, essentially we're just like standing at the gates with signs, right? So that's why, again, I harp on access, and why I'm so big on it, and why I will pick that fight. You know, you want to try to manage and limit my access and intentionally in my movement? No, we're not going to play any of that. So there's a very high, it's very highly unlikely that any one issue is solely 100% attributable to one cause. Meaning, so if you have an issue like domestic violence, just notice this. Anytime domestic violence comes up, you don't even have to be a part of the conversation, but if you hear people mention domestic violence and people start talking about it, notice right away the gender of that conversation. Note that, and it will be present from the very beginning. The presumption is always 100% of the time that women are victims, men are perpetrators, and that's why you see in anywhere you go, you are going to see more services catered towards women, female victims of domestic violence, rather than men. Now, they, at least in Washington, they can't, under certain circumstances, can't overtly say we do not serve male victims of domestic violence here, because that would be to posit explicitly and definitively that men only perpetrate domestic violence. Now, the reason why this is problematic is because readily available to any who are curious and able to devote even marginal amounts of time, nominal amounts of time, you will see in FBI and CDC data going back to the 70s that what is termed domestic violence or interpersonal, intimate partner violence, whatever, in what is notoriously a gendered issue from family court to criminal court to civil court, it doesn't matter. Most, if not all, of the services are geared toward female victims of domestic violence. Now, that in itself should be a red flag. If you encounter an agency where 100% of the people accessing services there are female, that should cause you to question what in the hell is going on. Because it is statistically and mathematically impossible, just based on the data that we have going back to the 70s about domestic violence, which is, again, mutually, 95% of domestic violence is mutually escalated violence. Men marginally beating women out, no pun intended, seriously. Taking the lead, men barely taking the lead by a slim margin. This is problematic when these conversations start, and they're gendered from the beginning, with the presumption again being that women are ultimately always the victim and men are ultimately always the perpetrator, and that any violence perpetrated by women toward men is reactionary or preventative or trauma-induced. If any of these things come up, this should cause you to question exactly what is going on. And if in that instance, you're a part of a conversation where it's gendered and skewed in that way, you have to call that out. That is your responsibility to call that out. Because the presumption cannot be 100% of the time that women are the victims and men are the perpetrators of violence. It cannot be. Cannot be. That cannot be the presumption all of the time. But that is what is ingrained. That is what is ingrained. Now, you can find, I've had debates in many trainings over the last 5 years with, I'd say probably 3 or 4 individuals who were touted as experts, and they all have the same rap, they all have the same routine, they all quote the same data, and I always ask them the same questions. And I have to ask them the same questions, because publicly and overtly, unless they want to be, and this is why they won't, they don't want to be deemed as fanatical or someone who is intentionally leaning on a gender bias and gendering an issue as complex and nuanced as domestic violence or interpersonal or interpartner violence. Almost none of them will say that there are no male victims of domestic violence. What the go-to or default trapdoor or escape door here is usually it's difficult to measure because, until they quote 95% of female perpetrated domestic violence goes unreported, they're able to measure that, right? But that takes you back to another thing. So if I were to call, hypothetically, if I were in a domestic dispute with my wife and she assaulted me and I were to call law enforcement, from the onset, I'm the one who's being judged because men don't have that. The laws and the protections are not set up for men to be victims of domestic violence. Now, I would ask you, when picturing a male victim of domestic violence, remove from your head the idea that it has to be a physical punch, a slap, a stab, a hit, any kind of stuff like that. Because all things being equal, if, when reversed, any form of manipulation or abuse perpetrated by a man to a woman is domestic violence or is violence. The same must be true when these same tactics or abuses are perpetrated by women against men. It has to be the same. Has to be the same. There can be no difference. There can be no difference. When you hit them with that, the back door goes away, the trap door goes away. The escape hatch suddenly is stuck. I've honestly, and this, I'm proud of this. I've shut trainings down that had 60 people in them. Shut them down. Shut them down. Had 3 or 4 experts, quote unquote experts, tongue-tied. Why were they tongue-tied? Because they never meet any resistance. No one ever challenges the narrative. No one ever says, well, how is it then if so many women are victims in this way, that 70% of men make up the homeless population? How is it then that 80% of men commit suicide due to losing everything? Just a man can lose everything based on accusations. It doesn't even have to be true. You can be charged. As soon as that protection order is in place, you lose your house, you lose your job, you lose your family. And if you don't think that there are people alive today who don't recognize the potential to weaponize the gendered system against other people, you're more naive than I thought. Now, this is the kind of stuff that makes me really unpopular in certain circles. Because I do my homework. Because I have been accused of these things before when they've been untrue. I know how that feels. I know how it stings. The point is, again, that 100% service rate, that data is collected, right, by state and federal governments. Where do you think funding comes from? Now just follow the money. Follow the money. And then you can follow the money to the services. Follow the data, follow the money. There's a direct link. That's just an example. There are many others. That was one that came to mind. In each of the times, and it does help. It does help. There's a lot of good study and data coming out of the UK, because the UK has the guts to unpack and parse these things out, you know, using their data and ours. It does help to be able to supply studies, data, you know, domestic and foreign alike, you know. Because that way you're not just sharing conjecture, speculation, and opinion and emotion, right? You can actually back these things up. The fortunate thing about some of the quote-unquote data collected or displayed rather by some experts, of which I don't claim to be. I know a thing or two. It's odd, you know, when things impact your life, how keen you might become to developing an interest in learning more about said things. Anyway, that's me. a lot of the stuff that's presented and touted as truth or espoused as truth is cherry picked and curated, and intentionally so. One of the trapdoors is, well, and you get no argument from me here. Who is domestic violence more dangerous for? Now, if we are to set some parameters, which happens with impunity, no one questions this, but if we were to set some parameters, and they were, start with physicality and with potential for harm, add in gender. Who is domestic violence going to be inherently more dangerous for? Women. No argument for me there, for sure. At my heaviest 270 pounds, were I to use my, experience with, pugilistic things, been in a few dust-ups, were I to use against my wife or a woman of, her size or smaller, my physical ability and strength, the consequences there would be devastating. Whereas, definitely, for sure, a woman my wife's size or smaller could definitely do some harm to a guy my size, but the likelihood that it's going to be more traumatic for them on the receiving end of it from me, yeah, that's the truth. Can't stop there. But those are those parameters. Now, if we are to extend that out, right? We're talking about death and serious injury. Extend that out, right? And then we can pull in the consequences for men of just being accused of domestic violence, let alone perpetrating it or being found guilty of it, which is a different thing entirely, because men do, and women do. And this is not a tit for tat thing. This is just facts thing, since we're so caught up on facts these days. Let's try some real ones. Again, referencing the higher suicide rates in men. Why is that? Is that just because we have a natural propensity to be violent, and if there's no one else to be violent to, we just do it to ourselves? Come on. Or could it be due to parental alienation, homelessness, desperation, depression, clinical depression, addiction, born of the need for a coping mechanism, coupled with social training of what men are supposed to be, and our current station is in direct conflict with all of those ideas, right? We can't even provide for ourselves. Haven't seen our kids. Lost the respect of our community, our friend groups. Lost our job, our home, family. Have nothing. What then is left to live for if everything that we've been taught about being a man is removed? Based on, dare I say, a gender neutral, like I think this would be gender neutral issue, right? We're looking at it, looking at the data. And if we feel free, please hit me in the comments and we can have a discussion offline. We can meet, you can come on the podcast, and we can have discussions about this. I'm more than willing. And if you have data that proves me wrong, please, I would love to be in the know about that. But if men are so just inherently violent, why does the data represent women in the majority when it comes to child abuse? If men are so inherently violent, why does the data represent women in the majority when it comes to, I forget the term for this, but killing their kids? Point is, hopefully when we're engaged in things, or we have positions, or we hold space in areas that can potentially affect not just today, but for the foreseeable future, the lives of people, especially dads. That's another big thing. Another big thing for me is dads. You know, we got to hold a seat for dad. Were we chop liver? You know, we are an elemental piece of this puzzle. We got to hold space for dads. And listen, pay attention. Do your own research. I did this research, just the DV as an example. I did this research all on my own, just because some of this stuff, it didn't make any sense to me. And what I'd been told about myself, which was wild and completely untrue, there's got to be an answer for this. There has to be a solution. So I had to start tracking down what the root of these ideas were and where it all came from. And I hope, like I say, that in spaces where you have the potential to do great healing with and for people, where you also have the potential to create great harm, that you do your homework. You don't just rely on don't even take my word for it. Go look this stuff up. Prove me wrong. Because in the process of trying to prove me wrong, you gonna learn some shit. Trust me. That's how I learn a lot of shit. I want to prove a motherfucker wrong. Right? And it's usually about a narrative about me. I've had to get good at a lot of different stuff that I had no idea that I even had an interest in. But it's important. Again. With just being an example, but it can be anything. It could be anything. It doesn't matter. It could be substance abuse stuff. It could be financial stuff. It could be parenting stuff. It could be race and gender issues. It doesn't matter. What we have to do, what we must do, what our responsibility is to check this stuff when it happens. It's important. It is important because if it's not highlighted, if it's not identified, these things never change. These things never, ever change. And I get it. I have conversations with people that are close to me and with my wife about, oh God, man. Like I literally have a thought sometimes and like, damn, why am I like this? I'm just like, damn it, man, why am I like this? Why can't I just see stuff and just let it go? Why does it matter to me so much? Why? One of the reasons why I know that it matters to me so much is because I've been a victim of a lot of stuff. A lot of things that weren't my fault. That a lot of people who don't have any experience with, that I lived through, who they have a lot of really wacky opinions on. And we'll dig into that. I'm just gonna damn it. But someone who lived it, I have to be the one. If no one else is gonna say it, because other people who are like me or lived through similar things that I have, they fall into this trap, right? And this trap is that the people who are on the other side of the table, right? They're the experts. They're the smart ones. My life has been trauma and stuff like that, but that's why I'm all screwed up. I can't think as good as this person. This person's way smarter than me. That's horseshit. That is horseshit. They're just trying to figure shit out on the fly, just like you. And one of the reasons why they're so good at talking about different things or certain things is because they talk about the same things every single day. There's practice. Ask them a question that makes them deviate from that routine, from that rap, from that sheet of rebuttals. Watch them stutter. I do it all the time. And because when I was growing up, I love my dad. I really do. And I love my mom. I really do. But both of them, their issues, their demons, you don't know what it's like. And this is one of the reasons why I knew that I had to make a change in my life. Because I remember being little and knowing that I love my dad, right? But knowing that when he started doing the funny smelling stuff, not weed, but the other funny smelling stuff, crack, that he turned into somebody different. And that person was scary to me. And my dad wasn't like a violent guy, but I've been big on picking up on energy, been really sensitive to that since I was a little kid. And the guy that my dad turned into when he was on crack, like I said, was terrifying. He was ice cold. Just shark eyes. No emotion, just cold. Never. There were periods of time when he was on bender where my dad didn't speak a word to me for days. Days. Not even a grunt. And I, during those times especially, wished more than anything that I could be so small and invisible. I remember I used to daydream in my room. Well, sometimes what doubles my room, but daydream about turning into a bug or something small that I could fit through the crack in the windowsill and just fly away and disappear. And never have to come back and be around my dad and these other scary people anymore. People who've not lived through stuff like that, they don't know what it's like. So, and I've had my kids tell me the same thing about me and my addiction and how I was scary to them, and then how alcohol and drugs would change me into a version that they didn't like and were afraid of and didn't want to be around. For a long time, that was really hard for me to hear. Until that message connected with the little boy inside of me that knew exactly what they were talking about. And if you've not lived through that kind of shit, you don't understand addiction. If you've not lived through that kind of stuff and then suffered in your own prison of addiction, there's not a lot you can tell me about addiction. You don't know what the pain is like. You don't know what that kind of a household dynamic is like. You don't know what that spirit energy is like. You don't know how fucking terrifying that is. You have no fucking idea. You got no clue. And I've been on my own so long that I'm like, I still got a lot to learn, but a lot of you can't tell me shit. A lot of y'all can't tell me shit, man. Oh, man, because I done seen some shit, bro. Not as much as some, but more than others. And something my wife said to me made me think that sometimes people may miss the truest messages of my heart and my intention behind sharing my story, being such a strong advocate for change, stepping in and holding space, even when it's dangerous, even when it's risky for me, starting that what I've been taught is the good trouble, which a lot of people don't, because either they're job scared or they're people scared or they people please or they're yes men and women or whatever the case might be. I think God knew what he was doing when he stirred up this soup that's been my life. Because it's given me, I think now, a pretty balanced mix of, I'm just brave enough to step in there and say something. Fuck it. Why not? What's the worst that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? I'm gonna keep coming back till they tell me not to. Wherever it is, and shit, I might still come back even when they tell me not to. But I digress. I really do believe that, and I'm comfortable with not being acknowledged for this in any way. I've had people reach out. That's cool, and that feels great. But I know that there are people out there who are right now the little boy that I was, or once were the little boy that I was, who need to hear my message, who need to see people like us recover, and people like us come out on this side of it, and people like us, after making a complete mess of everything, pick everything up, put it back together, and build it stronger than ever before, and continue to go, and continue to go, and continue to go. And that it's okay to show all of the ugly parts, all of the messy parts, all of the impulsive, all of the immature, all of the everything that makes us who we are. I think it's really boring to be, refined and polished and just this super manicured version of a person, because there is no human being like that. There's nobody perfect. There's nobody like that. So why do people run around pretending to be? You gotta stop. I mean, that is if you want people who come from where I come from to take you seriously. Because I'm telling you right now, running around behaving like that, the only people that are taking you seriously are other people like you. Not people like me. We see you as an intruder. We see you as someone who's coming in who thinks they're smarter than us, who thinks they know better for our lives than we do. That's how we see you. I don't want people to see me that way, so I work really hard at being exactly who I am on any given day. And that includes, everything. Everything. Of course I'm going to behave, Kim, I'm not going to go, to an office building and, moon people or, blast gangster rap or whatever that, I understand how to navigate space appropriately. But my hope is that in that small, brief window of willingness where absolute desperation, you are right here, you are at rock bottom and you can't fall off the floor, so that gap is closing, increasingly closing. And just at the end, you jump through and you grab a hold of something. I hope that something that I say in that moment is something that sustains you and gets you through. Just in that next level, that next 30 days, that next 90 days, that next year. Because, bro, sis, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like this shit was easy. I mean, I have a solid amount of resolve, but I'm telling you, I spent many days and nights frustrated, exhausted, crying, emotional, wanting to lash out, wanting to give up, but I didn't. I kept coming back. I kept coming back to my recovery. I kept coming back to my spirituality. I kept coming back for my family. I kept showing up. That is the message. That's the point. And no one has the power to do that in your life but you. That's it. Nobody else. I can offer guidance. I can offer experience, strength, hope, and wisdom. I can be there as a support. I can refer services. I can recommend different things. That catalyst for real change is right here, buried right here. You have to dig that out. And you can do it. Oh, you can do it. Anyway, you almost got me. You almost got me. I don't cry that much, but sometimes this stuff, it just means so much to me. I get pretty emotional, man. I want to see people change. I want to see growth happen because I know it's possible. However, when we're talking about the systems that oppress and affect people who are marginalized, otherwise voiceless, or whatever, that shit doesn't just happen on the opposition side of the table. That happens right here. All that programming, you ain't impervious to it just because you're on this side. You curate and gatekeep and do all the same shit. You double talk and talk over people's heads and manipulate, doing the same shit. It's the same thing. Same game. So, I highlight that shit wherever I see it. What you gonna do? What you gonna do? This makes me really popular in some places and really unpopular in others. And I'm alright with that because I can lay my head on the pillow at night with a clear conscience and a satisfied heart because I know that I showed up and I worked hard. Now you might look at this like talking on this podcast and being vulnerable and airing all this stuff out as something that's easy. You do it. You do it. If you don't think this is hard, you don't think this is work, exposing your life and all of its sensitive details in the hope that someone will grab some of it and help them change and help them grow, you do it. But you won't, because it be like that sometimes. Anyway, if you didn't do it on the way out, if you didn't do it on the way in, do it on the way out. Hit that like, subscribe, post notification bell so you can stay up to date on all the fun and super califragilistic dope shit that we kick here on the It Bees Like That podcast. Peace, y'all.